When you look up at the sky at night and see that giant gray rock in the sky, it's hard to imagine that over 50 years ago people were walking on it. The famous first moon landing is a monumental moment in history, and it's really evidence of what can happen when people come together. I have enjoyed studying space and space exploration for a few years now, and in this speech I will inform you on the struggles, the inspiration, and the results of the first famous moon landing. In this speech I will be pulling bits of information from two books. One is One Giant Leap by Charles Fishman, and the other is The Man on the Moon by Andrew Chaikin. Landing on the moon was a very big goal, especially 50 years ago. The source of inspiration for this goal was actually just competition. In the middle of the 20th century, the Soviet Union and the United States found themselves in the middle of a Cold War. At first, the goal of the Cold War was just to see who could manufacture weapons the quickest, but when the Soviets launched their first satellite, the Sputnik, into space, America saw it as another source of competition. Thus began the space race. Americans and the Soviets started sending more and more satellites, rocket ships, humans, and even chimps into space in order to try to outclass each other. According to Adam Mann on What Was the Space Race at space.com, the Soviets were actually the first people to send someone to space, and that was Yuri Gagarin. This was a big win for the Soviets, but America would get the biggest win of all when they got a little bit of more inspiration. On September 12, 1962, President JFK gave his famous moon speech, encouraging Americans to try to put someone on the moon and safely return them home by the end of the decade. This was a very big challenge, but America took it seriously. Catching up in the space race was definitely a struggle because the Soviets were always one step ahead, but America was determined. Out of this came NASA and the Apollo program. The Apollo program was big, 500,000 people big, and it was all dedicated to one goal. The Apollo program made individual missions, each to accomplish getting to the moon. For example, Apollo 4 tested the rocket that sent the people into space, Apollo 8 sent people into orbit around the moon, and Apollo 11 was the mission that finally actually put people on the moon. Each mission seemed to find the astronauts more knowledge and got them closer to their goal, but not every single mission was a success. Apollo 1, which was going to be the first manned crew flight, unfortunately ended up in a fire before the rocket even took off, killing all 3 members on board. NASA and of course everyone was devastated by this, but they did not let them die in vain. They worked even harder on safety protocols and worked hard on everything they could, trying to get back on their goal. The other Apollo missions passed, and Apollo 11 actually had some intense training, according to Alex Arbuckle on his article, Practicing the Moon Landing at Mashable.com. For 6 months, the astronauts had trained the same exact steps they would take on the moon over and over and over again. They also had to learn every single protocol of the rocket, every part of the rocket, and every single error code that could pop up on screen. They even denied a dinner with President Nixon because even missing 1 day in the 6 months could set the project back many months. After all their training, 600 million people sat at home, waiting and watching as Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the Saturn V, the rocket that would take them to the moon. On July 16, 1969, they launched for the first time, and on July 20th, 1969, they actually landed on the moon. But it was not as simple as that. They had many, many struggles along the way. Alarms sounded very often, giving them steps to quick repairs they had to make. They had a low fuel scare, which they did not know they would make it to the moon afterwards. And one of the astronauts accidentally broke a switch that was very important to getting them off the moon. Him being an engineer, he was able to find a quick workaround. After all this, and after many years of struggle and hundreds of thousands, even millions of people hard work, Armstrong took the first steps onto the moon and spoke his famous words. They spent 20 hours on the moon collecting samples, taking pictures, and leaving objects behind that had proved that they had finally won the space race. And then they accomplished JFK's mission when they launched off the moon, returned home, and landed in the ocean safely near Hawaii. America watched, and of course they celebrated. In this speech, I've informed you on the struggles, the inspiration, and the results of the moon landing. It was through many people's work and cooperation that this happened, and it's probably one of the biggest examples of teamwork in history, and I hope in the future we can find inspiration from that. As Armstrong said, this was one giant leap for mankind, probably one of the biggest we've taken. I hope in the future we can continue to explore space and do it just as well as they did.